Do you find enough executives from various companies, without naming names, are doing this enough right now for advocating the industry? Hey everyone, welcome to our latest TDR Cannabis exclusive. Happy summer days. Big guest here today. Very, very well-known person. Have you seen him on a number of times on our podcast? Who has an incredible business model, and a lot of ties to Washington, as we welcome in Rob Pelorus, co-manager and president of the Pelorus Capital Group. Good to see you. How's your summer been?
We're hanging in here. It's a little hot.
How is it, Newport Beach, this time of year?
Well, we're at the beach, so we have that coastal breeze, but it gets close to 80.
I wouldn't want to go 50 minutes inland. Been out in San Diego this time of year. Man, does it get hot in a hurry. But good to see you. Good to see you. I know we've had a few conversations over the past couple of weeks. A lot of great momentum. We had Dana Rohrabacher on a couple of weeks ago, which was got a lot of positive feedback based off of that. But before we get into any conversations regarding Washington, let's first look at your recent monthly report regarding your fund, which is June of 2023. That saw your fund produce an internal rate of 0.98%, which is yet another steady gain. For the year to date, the fund has produced a return of 6.04% for the first 6 months. So on pace for the average of annual returns year over year of 12 to 15% returns. So your comments regarding the fund's overall performance in the first half this year?
Yeah, so we're a debt fund, and our goal is to hit that target to 12 to 15%. And, it's a lot different than an equity investment where you're, betting on what the future value of something is. Here, we're just mortgage notes secured by commercial real estate, and we're collecting interest and distributing that to our investors through a REIT dividend.
Yeah. We've seen some equity stocks get hit pretty hard this week. Boris Jordan from Cureleaf commenting about how he doesn't think SAFE is going to happen until the beginning of 2024 at the earliest. But you've had some pretty impactful conversations with some well-connected people in Washington. What are you hearing right now?
So I don't have any new updates from the last time that I spoke with Danes, but I spoke with him directly, and he seemed very optimistic. And he's the co-sponsor of the bill. I think that I think that there was a better chance of it going than I've ever seen before because of that the votes are there in the Senate. But this Section 10 and the markups in there is there's some things that got Republicans on board and some things that Democrats don't want. And cannabis is federally illegal still, and the bill is basically saying that this can't be singled out from banking, but the Republicans are saying, well, look, you can't single out other businesses that are actually already federally legal, such as gun manufacturers. And so that's where the little bit of the dust up is at. I believe that there's language that might be able to be utilized there might be some fallback places to go to if necessary. And so let's just hope that this Congress gets it through. We never know what the timing is. There's a lot going on in this country, more than just cannabis.
Yeah, I hear you.
I would say that it would be more towards the end of the year if it happened in this year, but it's going to happen. It's just whether it's this Congress or next Congress. I'm concerned because I want to see the uplift sooner than later, because the longer you wait, the less impact it's going to have for the businesses that all took the risk to come into the sector and go from legacy business to the legalized business. And so you've lost a lot of the impact that it could potentially have, and that's unfortunate.
Well, I think, as we've talked with you, a number of viewers, a number of months ago, were thinking, you're the type of company that wouldn't want SAFE to pass. We've discussed that and hit that head on as to how you would. So does this change, I guess, your approach with your business model? Because when you're dealing with some of your clients, like in your experience, do you find most of your clients are built to weather the status quo? Does it affect your fund or your company at all?
Well, our clients would be our borrowers, I think, in this perspective of what you're asking. And none of our borrowers don't have banking. In fact, we've never had a borrower not have banking.
Right.
And so I think that what would happen for our borrowers is that the cost of banking or some of the restrictions or the lower tier banks, non-systemically important banks that they're utilizing would open up to a much broader place. But there's still going to be the reporting that's required. And I don't see a large amount of banks entering the sector because they still have to do compliance, and that's still a pain in the ass. And there's 50 different states across the country, that potentially would have different
Yeah.
aspects on the state compliance of that. And so I don't see a huge change as everybody thinks, but where I do see the change is the custodial of shares and the potentiality to be on the major exchanges. That's massive. And if that happens, that's an uplift for everybody. And we want to see this happen. Our business model and our borrowers' business models all work within the current landscape, or we wouldn't enter the space.
Yeah, of
But
course.
I think it's beneficial for everybody if it passes, and we are actively working on trying to make that happen. So we're doing everything we can. I'm spending my time, our resources, to meeting with the senators and the congressmen to push this forward and to educate them as best as possible everything they need to know.
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting storylines this month, July cannabis, usually there's not a lot of announcements, but one of your borrowers, Jason Wild and the Terracin team, uplisted on the TSX, which is a big moment, I think, for the industry. It's one step closer to maybe listing on a major exchange. But what was your thoughts based off of that? It's a big step in the right direction, don't you think?
Yeah, it's awesome. And Jason and I will be doing some press at the New York Stock Exchange here coming up in New York and touching on that. But I think even more important, or just as important, is that Pershing is now back on board with them.
Yeah.
That's massive. So what you're trying to do is get the flow of capital to go into these companies, and you're trying to get the flow of institutional capital. And if you can't get institutional capital, it's just not that meaningful to be public in the sector. And everybody did go public on the bet that eventually it's going, in the near term, they thought it would be federally deconflicted from state policy, where you could, some way of being able to get on the major exchanges. And that has been very elusive at this point.
So you guys are both going to New York later this month, New York Stock Exchange, correct?
Yeah, early August, we'll be speaking there, both of us.
So what's the agenda then? He's obviously speaking to the exchange from a public equity side. What would your role be in all this? Like, what's on the agenda?
Yeah, so we've actually been speaking for many times there, and what we're trying to do is educate that sector because nobody is in it. And the New York Stock Exchange is actually already leaning in, and they are trying to get us up to speed as possible prior to any legislation happening. And this was last year that we started that relationship. So this is just part of what we do to break new barriers. Is it starts with education. And at some point, institutional investors, at some point, Schwab and Fidelity and all these people are going to be able to board us. So we've already been building relationships and getting pre-positioned, pre-approved, educating them, getting through the choke points of things that they're going to need to address in advance. And so that's just part of our strategy to be the first one to be able to be boarded as these things change.
Advocating for the industry, right? Not rocket science.
Yeah.
We heard that back in April. And I know from getting to know you better, that is one thing that you're doing first and beforehand. Like you've even said in previous podcasts, do your research, attend dispensaries, ask questions, boots on the ground, having these conversations. Do you find enough executives from various companies, without naming names, are doing this enough right now for advocating the industry?
Yeah, I can't speak to what other people are doing. I know that there are a lot of cannabis operators that are trying to do it. I just don't know what their approach is. Most people just hire a lobbyist, and that's the direction they go because they don't know any other direction to go.
Yeah.
We, through the relationships that I've had for more than a decade, have political contacts on both the House and the Republican, on the Republican and the Democrat side. And so I've been able to utilize those relationships, not only to speak with them directly, but it's just as important to understand how politics works and how decisions are made, why things happen in the bigger picture, and what strategy is. And most politicians will never tell you there's there's no power in saying yes. We
Yeah.
only maintain power with no's.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. Well, outside of politics, I know that you're very successful in what you're doing right now. One thing I wanted to bring up, you're going to be speaking at the Capital Raising Titans event in Fort Lauderdale. And for those that don't know, this is an event that's raised more than $500 million. So talk more about what this event is and why you in particular will be speaking at this event.
Yeah, it's just a broader conference of how to raise capital, and it's for people that have raised more than 500 million themselves or for their entity. So we're one of those groups that were selected to be there. I think that you've got some of the guys from the Shark Tank and other sectors. So we just happen to be one of the sectors that was selected to speak there, and we're looking forward to it.
Sounds like I should get my camera and get on the road. That sounds like a very interesting event. You got some Shark Tank people involved. That's interesting to say the least.
Yeah, I think O'Leary, I believe, is going to be there. There's some major people. It's a Richard Wilson event,
Okay.
and he's pretty well known. He's got probably one of the largest groups for family offices and people to looking for investments.
So from there, you're heading to Road Tour continues up to the Big Apple, New York. You're going to be at the, as you said, New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. You're going to be meeting with the credit investors while you're there. So is this going to be as well as you tour around with Jason Wild from Terracin?
Yeah, so I have the relationships with New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. And so, as one of our borrowers and a good friend, and with his recent announcement, I wanted to make sure, and we're both speaking at the Green Markets Reports that same day. So I wanted to make sure that he had an opportunity to speak, and his story is much more relevant than my educational story. So I wanted to make sure we got a piece in for him as well.
It's a great approach, to say the least. Last thing I wanted to bring up, which I think a lot of our viewers will find very interesting. You'd mentioned that you're going to be flying out to the Hamptons afterwards and meeting with Cory Booker.
Yeah.
What's the nature of the conversation meeting with Cory Booker?
Yeah. So look, I'm trying to speak directly with the politicians, and not going through some intermediary. And I've been pretty successful at when I go and meet with him, and he's been very reciprocal on providing information and his staff. And but I always like to try to speak with him when I can. So he was doing something up there, and I was invited to attend. So I'll go and meet with him, and maybe even drag Jason with me.
That sounds interesting, to say the least. How are you, like, is it just all based on a lot of the network that you have as to why you're invited to a lot of these events or speaking to certain people?
So they kind of there's a lot behind the scenes on how that happens. They know who I am from a group that I'm associated with that has tried to shape political policy for both the right and the left for decades. And that group is very well known, and I've been a member of that group for quite some time. So
Gotcha.
that gives some cachet, and that they know that I represent part of that group.
So looking back, second half of back end of 2023, what's some lasting, I guess, message or you want to communicate to potential investors about the fund itself and I guess the direction it's headed for the last 6 months of the year?
Yeah. So, we're just a debt fund. We don't have anything that's extraordinary. We're not trying to hit a 10x return. You theoretically should never have a loss of principal. So that's just a different risk profile. You're getting monthly distributions with us. Now, we do have equity positions in transactions with effectively no risk in those, because we don't exercise those equity positions unless we're what we call in the money. And ironically, most of those equity positions and those transactions were done at probably close to their all-time lows. So if and when any legislation happens and these companies, some of them are private and some of them are public, there is an upside that'll become disproportionate to where the basis was when we entered into those transactions.
If I could ask you one last thing, and that is, if you're an investor, you feel defeated and frustrated pertaining to the industry itself. Knowing the people you're meeting with, the events you're talking about with, bringing awareness to the overall industry, when you're speaking to that crowd, if you could communicate what you plan to say to some of those people about the future of the industry and, the positive outcome or outlook, both short and long term, like what would you say to some of these people that gives people still hope for the industry? Because I know a lot of people are, again, frustrated with the status quo.
Sure. So I try to take it more macro in that conversation is that this is a $30 billion revenue generating sector per year, and it'll continue to increase. We have a tailwind of growth as new states come online, as existing states turn recreational, and any of those states continue to expand the market of new users. So what I would try to tell people is that don't focus so much on the individual companies. The sector is going to survive. The sector is going to thrive. And there's going to be a shakeout in any newly emerging sector. And this is actually a sector that the global sector is moving forward, but each state is its own universe and it has a massive shakeout in what we call the maturation to a fully stabilized market. And I don't think that any market is fully stabilized or even close to that. So I would just try to look at it that way. It's so difficult. Even if somebody was knocking it out of the park initially, the landscape is changing under their feet. And if they're not able to keep up with that, they may not survive going into the future. So new companies are coming online. New companies are expanding into states that have different experience in that they may not be carrying the same debt load. They may be able to operate much more quickly and efficiently. They may not be buying their real estate. They may just be doing a lease option on that real estate, and they may be able to move much more quickly than somebody that's carrying this massive debt load because they wanted to expand in the markets years ago just to get their footprint, but they've never been able to turn a profit.
Yeah. Oh, how times have changed and what we've learned along the way, right?
Yeah.
Listen, appreciate the time. Enjoy traveling. I know you got some big meetings set up, so I guess dust off those air miles. Going to be traveling quite a bit, but best of luck. And tell Jason that we say hi, and let's keep in touch over the course of the summer.
That sounds good. Maybe we could get you to join us.
That's a plan. Already speaking to my assistant right now. Got to head to New York. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
All right.
Thanks, Rob.
You bet.
Hey, everyone. So what'd you think of the interview? Did you like what we asked? Is there any information you want to learn more of? Then leave a comment below and let us know what you think. As usual, share this video with your network, smash that like button, and most importantly, make sure to subscribe to our channel because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.